we would be looking into the introduction of sensory evaluation in food, then the importance of sensory evaluation in food industry. We would be highlighting the significance of sensory evaluation in food industry. We would be looking into the basic principles underlying sensory evaluation, then would be explaining you on the various sensory evaluation techniques, would be introducing various techniques which are used for the sensory evaluation. And then we would be also touching why this sensory evaluation is important for product development and what are the challenges and what is the future of sensory evaluation. That would be the core of today's half an hour session. So, yeah. What do you mean by a sensory evaluation? Hope everybody who's here understands what a sensory evaluation is. It's nothing. What we measure is the quality attributes of the food is being measured with the human senses. So sensory qualities, when we say about sensory qualities, particularly the flavor attributes, these are essentially to be measured subjectively. From early times, this judging has been the preserve of just experts who had trained themselves to remember and distinguish the small differences between the odor and taste of specific products like tea, coffee, wine, etc. So with the development of this sensory evaluation techniques if we say in a scientific approach, a scientific line, the experts are being now replaced by panels whose sensitivity and consistency have been established by training and repeated test. So sensory evaluation is the scientific discipline that will measure and analyze the human response to the sensory property of food. It would involve using human senses to evaluate and understand the characteristics of food, such as taste, smell, texture, appearance, etc. So sensory evaluation is very essential for assessing the quality, the acceptability, and preference of food products. So why the sensory evaluation? What is the importance of sensory evaluation in food industry? It will help us to detect the similarities or differences in product. It helps us to evaluate an existing product against benchmark samples. So we can improve thereby we can improve the existing product or create new ones doing a sensory. So also it helps to elicit a specific response to food sample to meet the consumer demands and expectation. It will also help to evaluate if a product meets its original specification or the standard meet the quality of the standard sample. So it helps out in troubleshooting the problems which is faced in food industry. So sensory evaluation also helps food manufacturers understand the consumer preference and create products that meet the market demand. So if we look into all these problems can be solved, the major problems such as the quality issues, everything, this can be taken care just by doing a sensory evaluation. So next is the basic principles involved in sensory evaluation. So when we say about the basic principle, so characteristics of food are perceived mainly by 5 senses, as you all know, that sight, smell, taste, sound, and touch. So the physical and chemical factors present at the location of sensory evaluation, where the sensory evaluation must be carefully controlled so that any possible extraneous effects of the surroundings on the test results are minimized, and each panelist should experience the food in the same environment. Sensory evaluation should be done in individual booths. So we should have a designated area for sensory evaluation. So we call it as booths, where it will be a closed space. So thereby we can avoid the communication between panel members, but panel members are allowed to consult with panel leader at any point of doubt. And if we are performing a sensory evaluation, the best time for performing a sensory evaluation is the hour clearly an hour after any normal meal. So if between 10 to 12 or 3 to 5 can be chosen. So this sensory evaluation should be conducted, once again, I'll say, in a controlled conditions. And it should involve selecting and training a panel of evaluators should be selected who have keen sensory perception and can provide objective feedback. So training, either we can have an untrained panel or a trained panel. That shouldn't be an issue. We can do sensory with a trained panel as well as untrained panel. But they should be able to give a basic feedback. Sensory evaluation should consider the context and background of the evaluators to ensure accurate and relevant results as well. Next, let's see what are the various sensory evaluation techniques. So broadly, we classify, there are 3 tests which we perform. That is the difference test, the rating test, and sensitivity test. That's the broad classification. So let's look into one by one. First, there's the difference test. So in this difference test is nothing, it's just the comparison done to identify the discriminant difference between 2 or more products. So in this difference test, more often comparison of just 2 similar products have to be done to establish whether or not 2 materials are perceptibly different in some respect. So in this different test, there are various types of tests. When we are saying difference, just by comparison of 2 different samples, there are various tests. One is the paired comparison test. Then comes the duo trio test, and the third one is triangle test. So when we say about paired comparison test, these methods are used to test the difference between 2 samples. There will be one standard and other will be an experimental sample. So 2 samples would be placed, and it can be done by untrained or a trained panel member. The duo trio test. So this was found to be useful for products that have relatively intense taste, odor, or kinesthetic effects, such that which might impact the sensitivity. A duo trio test is an overall difference test which will determine whether or not a sensory difference exists between 2 samples. And this method is particularly useful in determining whether product difference results from a change in ingredients, processing, packaging, or storage. Also, it will help to determine whether an overall difference exists or not, where no specific attributes can be identified as have been affected. So the panel is first given one of the pair of identical samples. So first one sample would be given, an identical sample, which is known as the reference sample. And then other 2 samples would be given successively. So in a random order. And they have to match which among them is the same as the reference sample. Clear? Next is the triangle test. So standard triangle test involves a blind evaluation of 3 relatively similar samples where the assessors are asked to choose the outlier. So in this test method, this test method is applicable when the nature of difference between samples is unknown. Attributes which are responsible for the difference are not identified in this. So if we compare to a duo trial, The triangle test can achieve an equivalent level of statistical significance with fewer assessors. So next, let's move on to preference test or the rating test. So preference test. So in this, these are the tests which are applied for better insight to know how the product is seen by the consumer. So if we look into the first test which comes, so this also includes a set of tests: ranking tests, single monadic test, two sample difference test, multiple sample difference test, hedonic rating test, numerical scoring, and composite scoring. So if we look into the first one, ranking test, this test is used to determine how the several samples differ on basis of a single characteristics. So the panelists are presented all samples simultaneously with some code, and they're asked to rank the coded sample according to their preference. So the ranking given according to the intensity of specified characteristics. So that's how the ranking test would be done. Single sample or monadic. This test is useful for testing the food that have an aftertaste or flavor carryover, which precludes testing a second sample at same session. The panelist is asked to indicate the presence or absence and or intensity of a particular quality characteristics. And this will be done with trained panelists. The completed analysis of two or more samples would be evaluated at different times, and the comparison would be done. Next is the two sample difference test. This test is a variation of paired comparison test, and it measures amount of difference. Each taster is served 4 pairs of samples in this. Each pair will consist of identified reference and coded test sample. So in 2 pairs, the test sample is a duplicate of reference sample. Another way, 2 pairs, we can say the test sample is the test variable. The panelist is asked to judge each pair independently. So degree of difference between them is measured. The test sample and the standard on a scale from 0 to 3, or any scale we can choose, and we can ask them to score it. Next is the multiple sample difference test. In this, more than one test variable can be evaluated per session, but with reduced reliability. The panelist compares each coded sample with the known standard. One coded sample is a duplicate of the standard sample. And they will be doing a comparison. Next, hedonic rating test. So in this hedonic rating, it relates to pleasurable or non-pleasurable experiences. The hedonic rating test is used to measure the consumer acceptability of food product. Panelists are asked to rate the acceptability of the product on a scale, usually of 9 points, ranging from like extremely to dislike extremely. Then comes numerical scoring test. So this is done when one or more samples are presented to each panelist in random order or according to a statistical design. The panelist will be evaluating each sample on a specific scale for a particular characteristic indicating rating of sample. So the panelist would be trained to follow the sensory characteristics. Last one in this is the composite scoring test. So in this, the rating scale would be defined so that the specific characteristic of a product are rated separately. This method is helpful in grading the products and also for the comparison of quality attributes by indicating which characteristic is at fault in a poor product. So the panelists have to be trained if they have to evaluate the dimensions of the individual quality characteristics critically. So next is the sensitivity test. So sensitivity test, it is mainly a threshold test. So we can measure the ability of an individual. When we say the threshold, it is just an ability of the individual to smell, taste, or feel the characteristics in food or beverages or substances which are used infrequently, selecting for evaluation in product research and development. So they are used to establish the intensity of sensory response of a food. So there are basically three types of threshold test. There is stimulus detection threshold, regulation threshold, terminal threshold, etc. So we don't have enough time to cover all of those. Next is the dilution test. Dilution tests are designated to establish the smallest amount of an unknown material. So it will be developed as a substitute for a standard product that can be detected when it is mixed with a standard product. Quality of the test material is represented by the dilution number, which is the percentage of the test material in the mixture of the standard product, such that there will be an identifiable difference in the order or taste between them. So next, we'll see what is a descriptive analysis in sensory evaluation. So descriptive analysis is purely by a trained personnel. It can be done only by a trained panelist. It's a type of sensory analysis which is used to measure the human perception and sensation during consumption of food. So these tests are, this can be either qualitative or quantitative. So if we carry out qualitatively with the aid of sensory description, so there are a set of sensory vocabulary which need to be used to define the product attributes. So when that panelist is trained, so they are taught of all these vocabulary, so that the whole team will be giving the description in the same manner. So there is a set of vocabulary to be used to describe the product. So the whole team should be trained in such a manner that they are able to describe it clearly. So depending on method, quantitatively with intensity rating for each described attributes. The essential methods of descriptive analysis include consensus profile, conventional profile, and descriptive profile. So here you can see a graph and the rating which is given and the graphical representation. So this represents a conventional profiling. So this conventional profiling is generally used to qualitatively describe, and if they have to quantify a product in terms of the characteristics, this is mainly used in product development and optimization to compare several products and also for monitoring the product qualities, which is defined in the context product standards. Next, coming to effective testing in sensory evaluation. So effective testing is used to understand what the sensory attribute contribute to product's acceptability and consumers' choice behavior. So the primary purpose of this effective test is to assess the current or potential customers of a product. Of this effective testing to understand how well a product would be liked and chosen by the consumer, which are not the objective measures, but rather are result of the wants, and it would be the need for making a decision. Next is the consumer testing, which is very important for a product development aspect. This consumer sensory evaluation is very critical to understand whether a product meets consumer expectation. If not, how they can be improved. Consumer testing will be used for a variety of functions. It could be for product maintenance, for product optimization, product development, evaluation of existing product in market. So the data which is collected is most important because consumer is the ultimate user of the product. Else, consumer doesn't accept it. It's all waste of time developing a product, and only the consumer knows what they want. So consumer tests generally fall into either
qualitative or quantitative test. So qualitative test would be for focused groups. It can be designed to elicit information about consumers' desires, to probe the consumers' minds. We can understand the purchase behavior or further understand the acceptance measure by doing such qualitative tests. So if we go for a quantitative test, preference or acceptance tests it would be designed to give data which indicate how many people would prefer your product, how much they like a product, or what they perceive about specific attributes. So if we are doing consumer tests, it includes central location test, home use test, and focus group test. Location test, if the products are ready and which can be, we can just do it in a public space also. Home use test for those products which would be provided to the consumers, they will have to test at their home level. Focus groups, so it will be for a selected group. We'll be testing only with a selected group of people. So next, let's see what are the application of sensory evaluation in product development. So this sensory evaluation helps in developing the new food products, and also it helps us to improve the existing one. It assists in determining the optimal ingredients, flavors, textures of a product. Sensory evaluation guides product reformulation, and also it ensures the consistency in sensory attributes. So this sensory evaluation will help us in solving many problems in food industry. So it is applicable for a new product development. If we have to do any product improvement in a formulation, if we have to do any changes, we have to definitely go for a sensory evaluation. It helps us in taking a decision like process improvement by measuring the effect of process change on quality of the product. Sensory evaluation will also helps in cost reduction. So if we have to produce equal product quality at lower cost, so sensory evaluation is a very critical factor in determining all of this. Quality, even in quality, the quality maintenance during production and marketing, storage stability, consumer preference. So if we look into all of the aspects at every stage, sensory evaluation is applicable. Next, let's see how the interpretation of the results are done. So all sensory experiments must be planned in advance to make them more efficient. So interpretation of sensory result cannot be made by a direct examination because there are variability. There are many variables. We are just taking perspective of each individual. So there's chances, lot of variable result. There's another drawback as well of the sensory evaluation. So result must be tested by statistical methods. There are various statistical tools which are being used by the quality professionals. Statistical quality control, SQC, is what we term it as to describe them. So it's nothing but statistical quality control tools. It employs statistical principles and methods. So these methods will compare the results which is actually obtained with those that would be obtained by chance. So results are expressed in the degree of significance, which is the probability that the results are caused by chance, and developed to assess the magnitude of chance, what are the chances of causing variation, and to detect assignable cause variation. So results would be completely based on the level of significance. Next, let's see what are the challenges in sensory evaluation. So, as I said, since it's done by humans, there are a lot of challenges as well for sensory evaluation. One of the biggest challenge is subjectivity. So, taste preference is highly personal and it can vary between the individuals. What one person consider, if I consider it something as delicious, another may find it unappetizing itself. So this subjectivity can make it difficult to come to a conclusion. If we have to draw a conclusion, it would be very difficult if we get such results about a food product's sensory characteristics. So in order to address this challenge, sensory evaluation panels are typically composed of a diverse group of individuals so that we get a range of test preference. From that, we can get a representation. Panelists are also trained to evaluate products objectively based on the established criteria. Then comes the variability. So the sensory response can vary among individuals and even with same individuals over the time. Then when we say about complexity, evaluating multiple sensory attributes, if we have many attributes to be tested, that can be challenging, so which will require a specialized technique. Apart from these, there are some environmental factors as well, which can impact the sensory evaluation, such as temperature, humidity, lighting, background noise. These all can influence the panelist perception of food product sensory characteristics. So it should be, as I said earlier, it should be conducted in a controlled environment, which is designed to limit external influences and to minimize the impact of these factors. Then also another factor, if I'm saying, is a sample preparation, the amount of sample which we are giving for the sensory. So sample preparation is another challenge in sensory evaluation. How a food product is prepared can impact its sensory characteristics. So for example, cooking time and temperature can affect the texture and flavor. So it is essential to follow a standardized preparation method to ensure the consistency across the samples. Else we can't come to a conclusion on that. Then another challenge, since it's done by humans, sensory evaluation can be mentally and physically exhausting. The panelists, if they are fatigued. As a result, panelist fatigue can be a challenge which can affect the sensory evaluation accuracy. So to address this challenge, sensory evaluation is typically limited to short sessions with breaks in between. And panelists are screened for fatigue and replaced if necessary. So make sure you take necessary break, at least 15 minutes gap from one sample to next sample. Sample size. Sample size is a crucial consideration if we are saying for that is another challenge, which if it is too small sample size, it may not represent a larger population, while too large can also be impractical and time consuming too. So if you have to ensure the accuracy, sample size also should be determined. So based on either statistical analysis, and it should be large enough to yield a meaningful result. To the future of sensory evaluation. So sensory evaluation is an evolving field which is constantly incorporating new techniques from different disciplines of science. So the advancement of technology such as electronic sensors, we know, e-nose, e-tongue, e-eye, everything are there. So which may enhance and complement the sensory evaluation technique. So there is a growing focus on understanding the influence of packaging, branding, and marketing on sensory perception as well. So there are studies of how humans perceive food and beverage. It's currently undergoing a technological transformation, which is providing researchers with more data than ever. So it's a progressive study of new and fast sensory methods. So also the biometric responses are being incorporated for perception of food. And also AI, which is trending. Artificial intelligence is also used to integrate sensory data with the characteristics of the product and surge of contextual studies using all the virtual and augmented reality technologies. So these are all few examples for the transformation. coming to advances in the study of consumer psychological reactions towards food and beverage are also being explored. There are researches which are being done for regarding that as well, psychological reactions, how it is being, how it is affecting sensory evaluation. So we can say that sensory evaluation will continue to play a crucial role in ensuring the product quality and consumer satisfaction and market success. So finally, I can say that how we can help you. So we can offer different set of analysis for sensory. So we do customized sensory. We can provide expert panels. We can carry out consumer panel studies. Also, if you want any technology-based sensory analysis to be done, that also we can help you out in getting your samples done. So technology-based is more reliable. So if some of them would be very specific, they want very reliable results. If they don't trust for humans, then we can go for CTANG and all of those and get your samples analyzed. Thank you all for your time.